Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Calvin Tobin Show. I'm your host, Calvin Tobin, and today we have a lot to talk about. All right, Game 7 of the Sacramento Kings Golden State Warriors series was one for the history books because the baby-faced assassin that is Steph Curry went ballistic on a historic level in Game 7 that we have never seen before. In the past history of the NBA in Game 7s, we have seen many legends drop 40-plus points, and we have seen LeBron do that, we have seen Charles Barkley do it, we have seen Michael Jordan do it, and we have seen KD do it. But nobody has ever scored 50 points in a Game 7, and Steph Curry did just that and completely obliterated the Kings, helping the Warriors beat them by 20. And what's even crazier about it, with what Curry did, he actually accounted for half of what the Kings put up on the board, with the final score being 120-100. Steph Curry went off for 50 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, 7 threes, and even though he shot nearly 40 times, he still shot 52% from the field. And the best part of his game was the second half because he went off for 30 points in that second half. And the best stretch that he had was the fourth quarter because he scored 16 points in that fourth quarter. And Curry was so good in that fourth quarter, he nearly outscored the Kings himself in that fourth quarter as well because the Kings only scored 19. Now, with the Golden State Warriors beating the Kings in 7 games, they are now advancing to round 2, the semifinals, and they're going on to face LeBron James and the Los Angeles Lakers. And we all know the history between Steph Curry and LeBron James. Now, with Steph Curry, with what he has done in his career, being the greatest shooter of all time, and what he did in Game 7, does this make him the greatest point guard of all time over Magic Johnson? To me, he easily is, because if it wasn't for LeBron's greatness on what he has been able to do on the court, the Warriors would be 5-1, and Curry would be 5-1 in the NBA Finals, and Steph Curry would actually be perfect in the NBA Finals, like MJ, a perfect 6-0 if it wasn't for all the injuries they had to endure in the 2019 NBA Finals versus the Toronto Raptors. Now, Steph Curry's ability to handle the ball, his ability to move in and out of traffic from the paint to the perimeter to help his teammates out, always trying to get open, and we all know his ability to shoot the ball, being the greatest shooter. And this is what has elevated him more and more as his career has progressed. And this statistic right here should be the very reason, because it's also been long enough where he has been winning so much, this statistic should easily have Steph Curry as the greatest point guard. Yes, Magic Johnson, his ability to elevate his team passing the ball, but it's much different for when you can put the ball in the basket. Now, the statistic is that Steph Curry is 23-4 out of the 27 playoff series that he has played in, and that is winning 85% of the time. So that means any time that the Golden State Warriors are in an NBA playoff series, there is an 85% chance, no matter who they face, they will win. And that is the highest winning NBA playoff percentage in NBA history. That's higher than Jordan, that's higher than LeBron, Kareem, Shaq, Kobe, everybody. And the next couple highest on the board in winning percentage in the playoffs is MJ is at 81, Magic is at 80, and LeBron is at 78. All Steph Curry does is win, even in LeBron's tenure in the league. But when it comes to winning, the Toronto Maple Leafs have struggled in that department when it comes to the playoffs, because they haven't won a playoff series since 2004. They're always getting bounced out of the first round, and they have, other than what just happened this year, they have lost 6 straight first round series, and they almost did it. They almost ended the drought last year, going 7 games with the Tampa Bay Lightning, and then they ended up getting the redemption this year, beating the Tampa Bay Lightning in 6 games. And with the Toronto Maple Leafs winning in 6 games, nobody could be happier than these Toronto Maple Leaf players, especially those Maple Leafs fans, because it has been so long that since the Toronto Maple Leafs have won in the playoffs, and it was long enough to where it seemed like it was a curse, but now that curse and drought is no more. Now, in this Toronto Tampa Bay Lightning series, this series was bound to be high scoring every single game. And this series started off scary for Toronto because Tampa obliterated them in the first game, beating them 7-3. But then Toronto was able to bounce right back at them and take it to the Bolts for the rest of the series. And they came up clutch. Very, very clutch in games 4 and 5, scoring last-second goals in regulation to push it to overtime and then winning it in overtime. With Tampa, it looks like their dynasty run is coming to an end, or has officially come to an end from the last 4 to 5 years, because they are constantly in the Eastern Conference Finals. They have been to 3 straight Stanley Cups, and still in this year, they have always had one of the, if not the top offense in the entire league. But that offense can only take a team so far when you're losing key defenseman players along the way in that same time span. And how the Tampa Bay Lightning's defense has diminished is they have lost key players like Jan Rutta, like Yanni Gourde, and Ryan McDonough. Now, in this series, we had 2 of the most prolific offenses going at it, and it ended up being one of the highest scoring series of the first round in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and Toronto got the better end of it, outscoring Tampa 23-21, with the series totaling 44 goals. And this is what happened in games 4 and 5 was what made us all took Toronto 10 times, if not 100 times more serious when it comes to the playoffs, because in games 4 and 5, Tampa should have had, no matter what, based on how the game was going, they should have had those games wrapped up, especially game 5. But in game 4, what happened is that Tampa was up 3-2, and in the very last minute of the regulation of that game, Toronto was able to tie it to push it to overtime and then beat Tampa in overtime. They did the same thing in Game 5, but the reason Game 5 was more insane was because Tampa was up 3 goals in the third period, and Toronto just took it to a whole nother level, especially on the defensive side, not having any room to breathe whatsoever, and they ended up beating Tampa, but ended up pushing this game to overtime as well and beat Tampa 5-4 when that game should have been 4-2, 4-3, not with them winning, not 5-4 with Toronto winning. But Toronto ended up flipping the script in their favor and stealing the series away from Tampa. And the Tampa Bay Rays have continued their domination in the MLB as they still have a league best record in 23-6. And now, almost being 30 games into the season, they are one of 2 teams that have 20 or more wins on the season. And the other team that has 20 wins is the Pittsburgh Pirates, who are 20-9, and those 2 are going to be facing off starting tonight. So we're going to see 2 of the best teams this year face off for the next 3 games. So let's see who truly is the best team in that favor. But also, there's also about to be 4 teams in the MLB that are about to reach the 20 mark as well. But 4 total teams, counting the Tampa Bay Rays and the Pittsburgh Pirates. The other 2 teams are the Atlanta Braves and the Baltimore Orioles, as they both have 19 wins. Now, on Sunday, this was a time that you really wanted to watch baseball because there were 14 games played, and it could have been 15, but unfortunately, the Atlanta Braves-New York Mets game was postponed due to weather conditions. But they were to, fortunately enough, do a doubleheader yesterday with this series evening out. Now, with what happened in this 14-game slate on Sunday, 154 runs were scored, with the average amounts of run in each game totaling up to 11 runs, and the winner averaged 7.4 runs per game. But here's the thing. Four of those games, 4 of the 14 games, accounted for nearly half of those runs. And the games that did that were Seattle Mariners versus the Toronto Blue Jays, scoring 18 runs. The Texas Rangers versus the New York Yankees, scoring 17 runs. Then the Colorado Rockies versus the Arizona Diamondbacks, scoring 16 runs. Then the 4th game, which was the highest scoring game out of all of them, which was 21 runs. 72 runs were total runs were scored among those 8 teams out of the rest of who played. Now, with what happened, the most surprising game was the Chicago White Sox coming back against the Tampa Bay Rays in the bottom of the 9th. They had a 7-run surge and stole the game from Tampa, from them improving their record to 24-5, but now they're 23-6. The highest scoring game, the largest margin of victory was the Texas Rangers beating the New York Yankees by 13 runs, beating them 15-2. And the Texas Rangers guy, Josh Jung, had the performance of the entire night, as he accounted for 5 RBIs and 3 runs. The closest game, which ended up being the Seattle-Toronto game, Seattle ended up winning that game 10-8, and how this game played out was Toronto started off high, but Seattle finished high. And all Seattle did was hit home runs, in all of their runs, but one of their runs was a part of 4 different home runs that were hit that night, and Trammell and Raleigh were the most responsible for the majority of the runs that Seattle scored, because they were responsible for 8 of the 10 runs that Seattle scored to beat the Toronto Blue Jays 10-8. All right, that's the end of the Calvin Tobin Show. Please subscribe to my channel at Calvin Tobin Show so you don't miss out on any sports media, and please follow me on Instagram at Calvin Tobin Show so you don't miss out on any sports news whatsoever. And I'm out.